Hey guys, this is Gons. Just a quick reminder to visit theprophecyforum.com and sign up for the live stream. Use the promo code Canary Cry Radio, all one word, no spaces, and get 10% off tickets. Hope to see you guys there.
What do these festivals have to offer? These times of such intense change, both in terms of resiliency and pragmatic approaches. What is brewing in these transformational festivals that is the antidote that speaks so deeply to what is missing in our modern, materialist, urban societies?
For those of you who don't know what Burning Man is, most people think it's like a bunch of naked hippies doing drugs in the desert, and they're right. And it is much, 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 much more than that. So really, what I wanted to share with you guys is what the world could stand to learn from Burning Man. Because there's a lot of things that they're doing right out there.
For the post-war generations, it was rock and roll that burst forth with spontaneous wildness and possibility and broke the chokehold of Puritan Protestant paradigm on Western culture. But when rave culture birthed out of electronic dance music, what this represented to a new generation, first in the UK and the East Coast of America, and then the world, was nothing less than the full return of the ecstatic tradition to Western culture. And I believe what we are witnessing in these festivals is the rejoining of something that has been split in Western culture since the 13th century, when the church finally outlawed dancing and ejected this and all other ecstatic expressions off the church grounds and into the commons, where it developed into the tradition of carnival. And I believe what we are witnessing with these new transformational festivals is nothing less than the rejoining of the sacred ritual and the secular festival.
You're listening to Canary Cry Radio. Here's Basil and Gons.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Canary Cry Radio. My name's Basil.
And this is Gons. Welcome to episode number 078.
Just keeps getting bigger.
Yep. Our guest today is a return guest. His name is Carl Teichrib. He's the chief editor of Forcing Change. That's a monthly magazine that covers the globalist agenda. Carl's he's attended several conferences and meetings where they talk about global governance and all kinds of issues that you guys are all familiar with. So we welcome back Carl. Carl, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. Good to be with you guys.
Good to have you back, buddy. So I know you're a little sick. You mentioned that before the show, but can I just mention that it makes you sound like a total... Can I say bad? I can't say bad. I have to bleep that.
It's okay.
But your voice is awesome right now.
Well, that's cool. Very cool.
Yes, it's adding this whole, like, really, again, is there a synonym for badass? Can I not figure out a different word for badass? No.
A batter.
Anyways, I like it. So thank you for that.
Oh gosh, you just made my editing experience challenging right from the get-go. Technically, ass is in the Bible, so, it's really...
It's true. You're a bad donkey.
Yeah.
You're a bad donkey, Mr. Carl.
It comes out like Shrek or something,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. So you recently, wrote a book? Drew a picture? Did something awesome?
No, with the issue of transformational festivals is one of those topics that I've been kind of hitting on off and on for about the last year and a half. Yes, and did a number of radio shows on the topic this summer already. Last year, I published a report on the topic of transformational festivals, celebrating transformation, celebrating oneness. I published it in August of 2013. And it didn't get a lot of traction last year for some reason. I only had a couple of radio shows. There just didn't seem to be a lot of buzz. My own readers, however, when they read the article, when they read the report, I was surprised how much response I received from people saying, hey, that's my daughter, that's my son.
Yeah.
that was me. We have this in my backyard. And I realized I hit on something with this topic.
You know, I really think you did too. And obviously the number one thing that comes to mind is Burning Man. And I think a large part of that is because Burning Man has become just incredibly popular over the past few years. You know, it was always kind of a counterculture thing that wasn't really for everybody. But in the past couple of years, it's just become this enormous draw for even in the mainstream.
Right. And not just Burning Man, the singular event, but the entire Burning Man culture. Now you have regional events in practically most states across the U.S. You have a number of regional events that take place in Western Canada. Some of them are quite large already, and indeed, the regional event side to Burning Man is huge already, even in other parts of the world. South Africa has a large Burning Man event that takes place kind of in parallel to what's happening with the Burning Man event in Nevada. It has become a global phenomenon. But what's important to understand is that this is just one piece of the idea of transformational celebrations and transformational festivals. And a lot of people have focused on Burning Man in the past and still do, and that's all good, that's dandy. But what I found out was that more or less we missed the bigger picture. We focused on one event and didn't realize that there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these events taking place around the world each year, possibly up to 1,000 of these events that are happening. Most of them in North America, but Europe, a lot in Europe, a number in Australia, New Zealand, South America, Central America has them. Even places like Nepal has transformational events. The one in Nepal is called Universal Religion. And some of these events attract tens of thousands. A lot are small, only a few hundred, a few thousand. A fair number are 10,000 plus. And then you have some of the really large ones. Some of them even make Burning Man look small in terms of numbers.
Wow.
Yeah, like Zagat, which is already in the six figures. Glastonbury, almost 300,000. I think last year was 280 or something to that effect, 280,000 people.
Now, what are some examples of this? I've never heard of either of the two ones that you mentioned. Are they similar? Are they like a Burning Man, or are they different? What are they?
No, and that's what makes this hard to kind of get your fingers on, is that there's a complete dynamic. There's a whole spectrum in terms of what it means to take a look at transformational events or transformational celebrations. On the one side, you have openly pagan, very pagan events, like the Pagan Spirit Gathering that takes place every year and has been taking place since the 1980s in the U.S. Midwest. You have things like FairyCon and fairy festivals, and there's a whole worldview built around the idea of fairy and nature spirits. Then you have things more in the middle, like Burning Man, things that are more recognized as this fusion of art and music and community and celebration. And then all the way over to the other side of the spectrum, you have events that are almost completely oriented towards music. They're simply concerts, but they're concerts whose theme is built around oneness, a theme of transformation. And Tomorrow World and Tomorrowland are perfect examples of that, where you have 180,000 people last year at Tomorrow World. I believe this year, Tomorrowland was around 360,000 people over the space of 2 weekends. And again, it's more of a concert theme. It's music driven, but from beginning to end, from their trailers and their video teasers, all the way through to the point where acts come and go on the stage. The stage itself is alive. It tells you all about the importance of being one, coming together as a global community, and everybody's sucking it up and dancing, and not even, some of them don't even realize that they're being preached to the whole time. You're being preached to. So there's a wide spectrum, but what draws all of them together, all of them, is that they look to achieve the idea of oneness and global transformation towards our unity, the unity of humanity, the unity between man, nature, and God, the concept that we are all becoming one. And this is a celebration, a modeling of this. Indeed, it's already being lived out in these temporary places.
Well, it sounds like a lot of what Genesis 3 with the serpent, what he promised, the eyes being opened, and it's almost like celebrating that as a global community. But how is this, how is the modern movement of, the pagan spirit gatherings? And I'm looking at a list here of starwood, brushwood, wisteria. There's all kinds of stuff. How is that different from like the 60s with obviously Woodstock and, some of those events that were pretty popular in the 60s and 70s that were, in essence, they were transformative cultural events.
Right. In fact, Woodstock is kind of considered the birthplace, and it was a festival that wasn't just simply music oriented. It appealed to a sense of transformation. It was considered a festival for the Aquarian age, and a lot of people forget that was a part of the whole mystique of being at Woodstock, and there were other music festivals at the time that started in the early 1970s. Glastonbury in England is a good example. Which was simply a place to come, listen to music, get drunk, run around, roll around in the mud, and have a wild time over the course of a weekend. Since then, Glastonbury has become more or less a transformational event. They've got stage areas that cater towards the green movement. They have areas for yoga. They've got different aspects where you can get in touch with your spiritual side while you listen to the music, while you engage in the community, while you interact with the art installations. All of it now is built around the idea of let's have a transformational experience. Music becomes the drawing card. It becomes that lightning rod that brings people in, but there's way more going on than just simply a concert.
Right. Now, before we get too deep into this, can you give us a definition of transformational events or transformative events that you use so we can all be on the same page here?
Absolutely. It is, at its core, the celebration of oneness, the celebration of a new humanity, the celebration of a transformation that's already taking place in the hearts of mankind. And, where I kind of stumbled into this is as a researcher dealing with global issues, trying to understand global governance, trying to understand the work of interfaithism, all these other interlocking areas of a one world system. Trying to understand all of that, I thought kind of thought to myself, all right, there has to be a cultural side as well, because if we're working towards if we're working towards a one world system, then every facet of life has to be touched. We already see that happening with transhumanism and technology. We see it taking place in our education system. We see it taking place across the board in so many different areas. And I've always had an interest in Burning Man because I knew it represented something bigger than just the event itself. And I've watched kind of from the distance the whole Burning Man experience. And I never have gone. I've been wanting to go for a number of years, but I've never been able to make it happen. But in terms of trying to understand Burning Man, I ended up stumbling into the fact that there was a much larger umbrella of transformational events that were taking place. And so when I started to peel back the layers, I realized, hey, this is the cultural side of celebrating one world. And they don't hide it. They don't make any, they don't hide the fact that that's what this is about. And so last year, I started really pulling a lot of this together. And this spring, I started doing the first presentations on the subject. And the first one I gave was at a prophecy conference in Fargo. And I had made the point that there was about 120 to 150 of these events that take place every year. And I was wrong. I was really wrong. I didn't realize until this summer, as I started to work on a Google Earth project, mapping out just where these events take place in North America, that no, there's not 120 to 150. There are hundreds of these events, hundreds of them that take place all around the world. And what it does tell you It tells you that we have already reached a point in our culture, in our Western mindset, that we can celebrate oneness. We celebrate this openly. It's not that this is a new way of looking at the world. No. All this is doing is mirroring the fact. It's simply a mirror of what's taking place already within our culture. It's a mirror of what's happening in the hearts of our neighbors, our family, our friends, our communities. And that's the important thing for people to realize. They're not breaking new ground. They're just celebrating the ground that's already been broken.
Right. Now, I'm just going to take the opposite aisle here for a moment.
Sure.
What's wrong with oneness? It just sounds like it's, opposing something like that would be just completely out of line, because, obviously we're all trying to get along. We're all trying to, treat each other well and things like that. What's the danger or troubling factor for you for oneness?
Well, the bottom line is it real? Is it real? Or is oneness reality? Or is it an illusion? If oneness is reality, then at the core of every ideology, every philosophy, every religious movement, oneness should be evident. We should find some trace of it somehow. And indeed, that is the case when you go through all the world religions, the spiritual pursuits, even political ideologies, those that look to collectivize, bring together mankind. Yes, this concept of oneness comes up over and over and over again. I have an old book in my library from the 1940s that was written by an individual who drew together all the various aspects of occultism, religion, superstition, and he did a comparative study from going way back to the days of Babylon and Egypt, all the way up until the late 1800s. And in this survey, when it was all done of religion and spirituality and occultism, the bottom line that he could find, the one thing that stuck out to him was all is one. Everything is moving towards oneness. Everything has an element of this at its core. So that is the dominant worldview. Peter Jones and other Christian commentators and theologians have been working through what this looks like as well. But here's the kicker. There is one worldview that says no, we're not all one. It's an anomaly. It stands apart from the rest of what history says. It stands apart from the rest of what religion, spirituality, political ideology says. And it is only found in the Bible. It is the idea that God is not a part of the created universe. He is not manipulated by man. He is not reflected in us as we are now all divine creatures. He is separate, he is exalted, he is holy, he stands apart from that which he made. All the other worldviews of oneness somehow integrate man, divinity, nature, the cosmos, energy, God into the concept of one. It all boils down to my own divinity, or the divinity that we find within nature, the tree spirits, if you go into the pagan worldview, even into the political side. A good example is Marxism and communism, which takes a look at the idea that man as a whole is all there is. It's a materialist worldview. The bottom line is the state or the party becomes God, becomes the force that the rest of mankind now has to bow down to. There's all kinds of ways of looking at this, but the bottom line is that there are really only two worldviews when things get taken down to the very basic level. Either we're God, either mankind is God, or we're not. And there's a God outside of creation. Understanding that distinction now then helps you to understand why I would be opposed to oneness. What's also interesting with that, guys, is that if oneness is real, then every ideology, every religious position should eventually come down to that point. The very fact that one exists that doesn't demonstrates that there's a fallacy in the thinking. And this really is what makes it so difficult for the world, and why the world has such a difficult time accepting the Christian position of Jesus Christ as exclusive, as the only way. Because how dare he be the only way when we're all one?
Right.
Right.
That makes sense. And I think there's something called biocentrism,
Right.
Which basically, life at the center, and that seems to be a permeating ethics within oneness.
Right. Right. And so that's why as a Christian, I'm looking at this going, all right, when you dig down, right down to the surface, what does this mean? What does this look like? Sure, oneness is appealing. It looks good. It's exciting. When you take a look at transformational festivals that celebrate oneness, it definitely has an appeal. If I was of an opposing worldview, if I was of a worldview of oneness, I could completely see myself immersed in this, because there is a sense of energy and ecstasy and excitement, and it draws you in, and you live this, you feel this. Whereas the Judeo-Christian worldview, where God is exclusive, outside of nature, outside of the created order, it's not a sense that you feel this. It's not something that tugs at you the same way that oneness does. And so the world literally draws itself to itself as they celebrate humanity's oneness. And just a couple of days ago, when was it? On Friday, October 24th, it was the global day of oneness. It seems we have a day for everything. We've got an Earth Day, we have Mother's Day, we have Father's Day. Even a couple of weeks ago, I didn't know this, but there's an International Raccoon Appreciation Day.
I celebrated quite heavily on that day.
Awesome. And so, just last Friday was Global Oneness Day, where they had teleconferences and seminars on the importance of recognizing your own divinity and connecting yourself with the divinity found in Mother Earth and the divinity of the cosmos. And humanity is moving towards celebrating and understanding and accepting our true singular identity, that we are indeed divine.
And this is, it's troubling when you put it in those terms, because all of the things that, we and yourself have looked at, like transhumanism, like the New World Order and their ideologies, it's almost like when you hear that the culture is completely immersed and have already adopted this ideology, I wonder if there's a little bit of, a dissociative sort of thinking going on, because a lot of, I would imagine, I don't know this for sure, I don't have, data or anything, but I would imagine that people that go to these events are expecting change, are expecting to make a difference in the world. And by uniting, that's kind of the ideal scenario, some kind of utopic vision of the earth and people. And, when you kind of whittle down to some of the ideas of the New World Order, I mean, it's similar. I mean, it's maybe a little different take, but I would imagine that the folks that go to something like these festivals are, if they're educated on global governance and stuff like that, would be opposed to it. But what's your experience with that? Are they in tune with that, or are they just, are they against it? What's kind of their view of the political side, the geopolitical and some of the other, like religion, and is it just all, hey, let's all just get along?
Well, when it comes down to the area of spirituality, it becomes that we're spiritual, but we're not religious, which is interesting, because that is considered to be right now one of the fastest growing religious categories when you're doing surveys. What is your religious background? Well, check off the one that says I'm spiritual, but not religious. Everybody seems to be going down that road. So from the religious side, that's the direction it's going. Politically, it is recognized that we are moving towards one world. Now, how that may look in terms of the people who go to these celebrations, it may not even have entered their mind that there's more going on than just simply a cultural side, that there is indeed there are geopolitical reasons for some of this. But at the same time, as I've kind of scratched around a little bit to try to understand the worldview that takes place at these these celebrations, these gathering places, there is definitely the sense that the world needs to come together as one. Even politically, it needs to start to come together as one. I don't think the majority of people going to these events have really thought that through and what that really looks like. Because this is something that appeals more to the lay person, and the lay person really isn't interested in understanding some of these larger movements that are taking place. The idea of world government and global governance is something that has at least in the sense of being in the culture, been more on the sidelines, more on the fringe. That's for guys in suits and ties, not for the people who are just running around living a normal daily life. And yet at the same time, what they're doing with these events, things like, especially with Burning Man, is that they're modeling what the world should look like. They're modeling what the world should be like. And so they're living in a microcosm, a type of a global society already.
Right.
And they see this as being openly democratic, radically democratic. And so if you take and extrapolate that into the larger world of politics, therefore we need to have a global democratic system that would look something similar to this utopian vision that they're now modeling and living. They're already experiencing.
Right. You know what's interesting? I've actually known quite a few people to attend these sort of events from a range of backgrounds, from Christians to people who are already sort of new agey, to people who just like the music, to people who need a place to take drugs. And it seems my immediate reaction is it doesn't seem like they are so into the spirit of oneness for the most part in the beginning, but then always afterwards, like you can kind of start to see it permeate their personality on their Facebook or whatnot. And when I first heard transformative events, I thought that the whole idea around it was personal transformation. And it definitely seems like a lot of that actually happens there as well. But what it seems like is happening is it's like, since this is the place that it's happening at these transformative events, surrounded by oneness and all this sort of new. I mean, they're almost all exclusively quite new agey. Right. I have a few people on my Facebook feed who, after going to some of these events, I guess there's a Facebook page called The Illuminati, and it's got 3.2 million likes. And the Illuminati, the posts on the Facebook page, it's like they post these sort of new age, help your life, let's get along type posts almost exclusively. And to me, what I've noticed is a lot of people, they may have heard of the Illuminati or something, but after they go to these events and they like the Facebook page and things, and they see, like, here's one, just to name a few of these posts: smile like you've never cried, fight like you've never lost, love like you've never been hurt, and live like there's no tomorrow. And then the next one is, if you miss someone, tell them. If you love someone, show it. Life is too short to keep your feelings inside. Stuff like that. Stay loyal, stay faithful, stay true. And it's like, what the heck? Like, the Illuminati is just like it's just like a cheerleader now. Like,
the Illuminati meets Tony Robbins.
Right. It's so bizarre. And then, but what I've found happening, and what is the actual scary part, is, they may have never known or heard of the Illuminati before, but now their first impression is that, like, oh, yeah, the Illuminati's pretty chill. They, they give me some pretty good life advice and blah, 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 blah. And it just sort of adds to the whole, like, I don't know. I feel like there's just some major brainwashing, if I'm just going to say it right out.
And that's interesting because transformational events, transformational festivals, you come at it as an individual, And as I've gone through some of the material, interacted a fair amount with people in Second Life who've been involved in transformational events. And actually, as we're speaking right now, there's one taking place in Second Life. There is a burning event, a Burn Man event that takes place every year in Second Life. And right now, the big one's taking place.
Right. And just so everybody knows what Second Life is, it's a video game that's very wide, very big world, and you can just go there and do anything. It's basically
Right. It's a 3-dimensional virtual environment. That's the bottom line. It's how do you describe it? It's a place where there are shops set up, there's schools set up, there's places where you can interact and kind of hang out with people. It's a weird place. Anything you can imagine, you can basically do in Second Life. It's a kind of a strange location. I've been in Second Life since 2009, and I've used it for a lot of social research. What's interesting is when you rub shoulders with people in Second Life who've been at these conference or at some of these concerts that have the oneness theme, or have been to some of the transformational festivals, they recognize the personal transformational side. Yes, it's impacted them directly. They may have even gone simply for the music to begin with, or just for the party. But while they're there, they encountered something more. They encountered their own inner divinity. They've encountered their own sense of identity as part of a larger human collective. And so the language that they use is reminiscent of a religious conversion. This changed my life forever. My life was going one direction, and my experience at Burning Man, or my experience at Bonnaroo, or one of the other hundreds of other ones out there, Alchemy Burn, has now changed it, and I'm going the complete opposite direction that I went. This opened up my eyes to a new spiritual reality. This kind of stuff. This is the kind of language they use. So there's a personal transformational side. There's no question about it. Even the organizers recognize that you might come just to party, dance, and listen to the music, but you're being preached to all the time, and you're being preached to in a way that will change you. Now, that said, at the same time, they recognize, and especially the organizers recognize, it goes beyond the personal. It's a social transformation. It's the recognition that I am one person in a much larger collective human experience. And it is that collective experience that will build a new way of looking at society, that will give us a new sense of what society should be like, that will then inform how we do politics. It will inform how we interact in the business world. It'll inform, let's say, if you're an educator, how you teach, so that you can push the idea of human collectivism, human oneness, one step more in your own daily life. And therefore, you will have a ripple effect, and it will cause the rest of society and civilization to move towards this idea that we are all indeed one, and we must do this now politically, economically, culturally, technologically. The list goes on and on. So they realize there's two tracks to this: the personal transformation, and as that happens, it's inevitable that will spill over into the social and cultural aspect of your own neighborhood, right within your own community. Right. And so this is something that is recognized, and it is advocated. Make this happen in your own life.
Right.
Wow.
Well, I mean, touching on what Basil said there a moment ago, I mean, I've had experiences where talking to people that are, not believers and stuff, and they get excited about, I want to just be a part of this next thing. And I said, what do you mean? He's like, this global order thing, this whole, and I said, like the New World Order? And he's like, whatever it's called, man, I just want to be a part of it. And I guess there's like a sense of, especially the young people, our generation, they need something to grasp onto spiritually. And I think that, for whatever reason, the traditional sort of religions have kind of disappointed in so many ways. And of course, there's all the arguments about, against Christianity and against religion in general, and all the wars and everything else, which, the young people don't necessarily get into the logical side of those arguments. But I want to get into some of the aspects of from a Christian perspective. I found a blog here by a Christian, posted on February 7th of 2014. It's called it's contextwithlornadueck.com. And this person says why Christians should go to Burning Man. And, I don't know if it's a he or she, but I think it's a he, maybe. Lorna? I don't know.
No, it's a she.
Oh, it's a she. Okay. So you're familiar with this person.
Yes,
okay.
I am familiar with her.
Okay. So she goes on here and talks about why Christians should go to Burning Man. And the reasons she give I thought it was sort of initially, maybe it's a good place for evangelism. It's a good place, to speak the gospel in kind of a radical way. But she says, I just want to quote this, Burning Man is a developing culture in our world and is leading dynamic change in the 21st century. As an adventurous cultural missionary, I see Burning Man as a place Christians need to be. It certainly is not for every Christian, but it is for those who want to change the world. It is for those who want to learn more and help form culture. And it's also for the visionaries who are able to see God in the midst of these newly developing cultures and can creatively tell his story. What is your response to something like that?
There are two types of Christians who interact at Burning Man. There's a handful, and I know a couple of them personally. There are a handful who go because this is a place where you can open up some interesting conversations about the meaning of life, who Jesus Christ is, and why in the world are you here in the desert? And then there's the other type who go because this is something that has become appealing. They see that there is a way of trying to change society and culture. But what's interesting is those who look to Burning Man as a model for society. I don't hear them talking in a way that distinguishes Christianity from Burning Man. It's almost like, what can we learn from Burning Man? You know something? It's like Paul asking the question at Mars Hill, what can we learn from the men of Athens? That's not the right question. Instead, it's how can we use that society, that culture? How can we use what they're believing as leverage to open up a conversation about the nature of reality? Paul, when he went to Mars Hill in Acts 17, gives us a phenomenal example of a culture that is completely interreligious. All kinds of different belief systems are there, and they got monuments set up to every deity imaginable. And of course, he finds the one monument that's set up to the God who has no name. Paul goes in there, and then he understands, and this is important, he understands their spiritual worldview. He understands their cultural context. And then he leverages that. He even quotes their philosophers. He quotes their poets. And he leverages that to bring the truth of Jesus Christ in there. Now, if that's the approach that we take to Burning Man, fantastic. If we go in with an understanding of what it's all about and then use that as a leverage point, fantastic. If we're going in thinking that somehow we can learn from this in a way that it will now change Christianity to be more accepting, more cutting edge, all the blah, 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 I'm sorry. All we're doing is mirroring what they're doing already.
Right.
So what? What? I do have friends who do go. I've one friend in particular who's been going for a number of years. And he's parked outside the gates of Burning Man. In fact, a number of years ago, he kind of got the boot at Burning Man. Out you go. Sorry, you're not tolerant enough with your Christianity.
Oh, what happened to oneness?
Exactly. Well, that's the illusion of it, isn't it? And so he's outside the gate, so to speak, and he has a tent set up with an Israeli flag that he hoists. And the Israeli flag becomes a lightning rod. Yeah, exactly. And so he has Jews, he has Arabs, he has people who are just curious coming and saying, why are you out here? What's with the flag? How come you're not inside the city, so to speak? And he'll use that as a point to discuss Jesus Christ, Christianity. The other thing he'll do is he'll hand out bottles of water. He'll fix people's flat tires on the side of the road because, hey, with 70,000 people coming in and out, things happen. And he'll use all those as gateways to talk to them about true Christianity, not the fictitious Christianity that everybody has in their head. It's interesting. Everybody seems to know what Christianity is, and they've rejected the thing that they think they know, but they're really, when you ask people what is Christianity, most people don't even really have a concept of what it's all about. They have maybe the idea of an institution or whatever. But when you boil it right down to Jesus Christ, that's where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. And so he's there, and he has a small team, and they work to bring a Christian message there. He told me of one incident where an elderly man was walking into the city gate, and he came alongside, and he just said, "Hey, why are you going to Burning Man?" And the fellow turned and looked at him and says, "I have a terminal disease. I'm here to discover if there's any meaning in life." Well, that's opportunity. And so my friend Robert took that opportunity. Now, that said, that's awesome. That is cool. It's not something that everybody can do because you are immersed in a really radical, really different kind of cultural situation. But those people who can do it, that's phenomenal. Now, the one thing that he is concerned about is that this will end up attracting those Christians who will go to Burning Man with bullhorns and picket signs.
Right.
And reinforce the negative image already held by those people.
Has Westboro ever showed up? I mean, that just seems like something they would love.
I know. I don't know. And I don't think so, but I don't know. And again, the Burning Man is just one. That's the one that's the lightning rod. But there's so many others. There's even some larger in the U.S. Bonnaroo in central Tennessee had 90,000 people last year, okay? Burning Man had 70,000. Bonnaroo had 90,000. Tomorrow World had, I believe, 140,000, which is just outside of Atlanta. So there's a lot. And the majority, by far, don't have a Christian witness. One does. I know of the Holly Festival, the Festival of Colors that takes place in Salt Lake City, Utah, or just outside of Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City, by the way, has one of the largest Hindu temples in North America. It has a very large Krishna temple. And so each year they have a large transformational event built around the Holly Festival. And I have friends who are Christian witnesses to the Mormon community in Utah who go to this Hindu festival to witness to the Mormon kids who are chanting Hare Krishna.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
How messed is that?
That's crazy.
Okay. But that just shows you now where we are culturally and how accepting this has become, whether people realize what is taking place or not. I gave this a presentation on this on the transformational festivals with Ray Youngian in the audience. Ray was one of the other speakers. He's an author who deals with the New Age. He came out of the New Age himself. I gave the presentation that I give on these events and the significance of what they mean. And afterwards, Ray came to me with tears streaming down his face, saying, as a former New Ager, he says, I look at this and I realize we as Christians, our worldview, we lost it. If society can celebrate at such a depth, with such depth and at such a level, with such intensity, and with so many people coming, whether they realize what they're doing or not is irrelevant. It just hit him that what it does is it speaks to the fact that our culture is so flavored with this worldview already that we can't escape it. It's here. Now as Christians, we need to wake up and realize it's high time that we engage with that culture, with our neighbors, with our family, with our friends, and bring to mind the true Christianity, the true nature of Jesus Christ, our sinful human condition, the character of God, especially the character of God, that God is not part of you. He is not part of nature. He is not part of the creation. God is separate. God is distinct, and he has a standard higher and distinct than your standard.
Right. Now, what about common ground with some of these folks? Because I feel like, even with transhumanism, which, I've been looking at for a while. I mean, obviously not as long as you have, but for the duration of this show and, making the movies and stuff like that, I've looked at it a lot. And what I'm finding is that their goals and what they're seeking is pretty much what the blessed hope is, right. New bodies, a new heaven, a new earth. I mean, they'll even use that language. How do we, use the common ground as sort of a launching point to, preaching the gospel to people that would go to these events?
Well, and that's a very good question, because there is common ground all the way through. When you take a look at things, even like transhumanism, world government, even socialism, all of these different events are speaking to something. They're speaking to the idea that salvation is required. Now, the difference being is that they believe that their experience, their concept of oneness, their idea of world government, or transhumanism, that is what's going to bring about some type of salvation. So what we have to do is recognize that there is a commonality here, that mankind is seeking some way of becoming saved, becoming more or less forming a new Eden. Whether it's socialism or whatever the worldview is, it seems that when you scratch below the surface, they all have a salvation message. They all have a messianic message of some kind. They're all seeking some type of way of saving the earth, saving society, saving us from even from our own hands, and then celebrating that. If we can recognize that, this is a common human longing, and then be able to demonstrate that, okay, yes, you're seeking salvation, you're seeking the salvation of humanity, the salvation of the earth. There is one who is our Savior, and we can maybe bring about a conversation that introduces Jesus Christ as the exclusive way of salvation. Your political ideology, your political platform will not save you. Hope and change will not save you. Fabian socialism will not save you. Marxism will not save you. Your transformational celebration of oneness isn't going to save you either. Good luck with it, because mankind, as we seek to embody this idea that we can save ourselves, we inevitably experience a bloody utopian dream,
right?
Not a happy utopian dream.
Right.
And history speaks to this over and over again. And okay, if we want to find common ground, recognize that humanity is seeking something. We're seeking some type of transcendent experience. And the bottom line here is Jesus Christ says that he is the way, the truth, and the life. Not that that's going to give you a transcendent experience, but when we place our faith and hope in the one who is transcendent, okay, now we have a different thing going on.
Now, at these events, you mentioned, obviously the oneness is being preached to them. And is there a way that that's happening specifically that's more, I don't know, I try to think of a Christian going to one of these events, like your friend, and having awesome opportunities to minister to people, to help people, to pass out water and change tires and things like that. What are some things that are happening at these events that would be considered competition to that? Like, how are they being preached to there?
Oh, sure. And every event has differences. Every event, there's nuances, hey? But I'll just give you one example. Lightning in a Bottle, which takes place in Southern California. Lightning in a Bottle has workshops on oneness, has workshops on your spiritual encounters. It has seminars that take place. It has group yoga experiences. They have a temple of sacred consciousness set up. It's around the clock, re-emphasizing the idea and the application of oneness. And so the entire event is, you could call it the worldview alternative or the worldview competition. And you go in from beginning to end, the idea of oneness is being hammered home through the experience that you are now encountering. I mean, you are participating. You're not just observing. You are participating. You are completely enmeshed and embedded in the worldview. And so you can go and do lectures and sit in on lectures. You can sit in on workshops on oneness or on shamanism or on transformational spirituality. Then in the morning, you can go and do mass yoga, group yoga. Then you dance all afternoon away and have that feeling of ecstatic dance where you're connected to each other. All your hearts are beating together in the rhythm of the music. And then in the evening, you're taking apart in a shamanistic circle with fire and dance and all the rest. Maybe later on in the night you'll be part of some type of a light art installation, and there you'll feel one with each other. And at the end of the day, you walk away and you put your trash in the garbage can and you drive off into the sunset, return to your boring 9-to-5 job, and you're going, wow, life is just simply not quite right. I've experienced this oneness, this model of what life is really like. That's the reality I want to live in, not the ho-hum 9-to-5 of my regular existence. That's a pretty big, pretty impressive and large type of competition to
I was going to say,
you know?
that sounds
good luck.
Sounds like some tough competition.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why when we encounter people, whether they're part of this transformational celebration or whether it's just your neighbor or your sister or your brother who now has connected into that worldview, now we have to be able to scratch far below just the experience that they've had, because the experience will speak volumes to them. It's all about the feeling. It's all about the experience. And so sometimes it takes a rude awakening, a little bit of a shock to the system to wake them out of that. An example, I gave a presentation on transformational events in Colorado Springs this summer to about a group of about 300 people. I had about 6 or 7 people come to me and said, hey, that's my child, that's my son, that's my daughter. I had one person come up and say, that was me. One person who told me about their son who was at Lightning in a Bottle, which is a pretty exciting transformational event, and noted for its colors, its art installations, and just this incredible sense, this feeling of coming together in world peace and oneness, and you experience this. And this lady was telling me that her son was there, and her son has rejected Christianity because of this experience through the festivals. And he was there with his backpack, and he had his laptop in his backpack. He had his money in his backpack. He had his wallet in his backpack. He has everything in his life of importance in his life in his backpack. And he put it up against the side of a tree, and he went to go dance, and he felt totally safe. This was a good thing. I mean, everybody here is open and honest and seeking peace and oneness. There's nothing bad going on. And then when he was done the dance and when he was done the feeling of oneness, he came back, and guess what? His backpack is stolen. and this, to him, all of a sudden it crushed him, because everything that his mother had told him about human nature, that there's a sin condition and that mankind is still evil in our hearts, all of a sudden that hit him. I mean, he just experienced the negative side. It wasn't all oneness, peace, and harmony, was it? And so it caused him to have to stop and reflect. What's interesting is at some of these events, like Burning Man, there has been some pretty nasty things that have gone on. Burning Man has a history of some pretty nasty encounters. There's been rapes. There's been suicides. There's been murder. There's been some pretty heavy duty stuff that's taken place. It's not all cheer and goodwill and smiley faces.
Right.
And so when all of a sudden that nasty side of life bumps into that feeling of oneness and peace, and that we're all singing Kumbaya, sometimes it has a tendency to shake people up. And that's one of the things that my friend Robert does when he's at Burning Man, and is he throws that back in their face. That yes, there's a nastier side to life, and there are standards that are higher than your standards. One example is he'll have people, let's say a man and a woman come in to where his tent is, and he'll end up having a conversation with them, and they'll say, well, you know, everybody has their own standard, and what's real for me is real for me, what's real for you is real for you, this grand mushy subjectivism.
Right.
And so he'll say, fine, dandy, yeah, let's go by those rules, you know, that sounds great. You know, you've got a really attractive looking girlfriend. I think I'm going to hit on her for a while, and I'd like to check her out. And he'll say it in such a way that's provocative. Mm-hmm. And the guy will be all up in arms right away. Like, hey, how dare you, back off, sicko. And the girl was like, you know, get behind her boyfriend, and, you know, you're a creep. And he's like, listen, you have just demonstrated that your worldview is false. There are standards here higher than your standards.
Right.
There is a reality that is based on a foundation. You're not being consistent with your worldview, and you need to now seriously consider what that means about reality.
Right. Objective morals and values that are not or gosh, how is it worded? Not binded to. I'm messing it up. Anyway, I'll leave that to the philosophers, because they're the ones that are really good at linguistically, explaining these things. But the use of psychedelic drugs is, hand in hand with, these events.
Oh yeah.
now, with our generation, I guess generations past as well. But I mean, growing up, I know that I encountered myself the use of psychedelic drugs at some point, and also thinking that they did open up my eyes to some different reality, so to speak. I don't think they were necessarily good things looking back, but it's the whole psychedelic movement is re-emerging, so to speak, in a very popular way, and I think these events are using that to push forward and thrive, and having that sort of influence on the younger generation. How is it used? What's the reality of it? And part of what I want to know is, if these substances are illegal, a lot of them, how is it that they have these contained events where so much of it is passed around without having just a big police bust? That's right. I've always wondered that.
Well, and at Burning Man, there is a large police presence. And in fact, there are guides on how to deal with the police at Burning Man, how to handle the substances that you bring in. And one of the things that's fascinating is that there is a debate within the transformational community about the role of psychedelics. It's understood, it's there, it's not hidden. Even in terms of the transformational experience through psychedelics, marrying that or partnering that with artwork, partnering that with group shamanistic experiences or group sacred experiences, the temples. It goes beyond just the question of the legality of it. It goes now into what is the benefits, and this is how the transformational community kind of looks at it. What are the benefits and the dangers of knowing that the psychedelic substances play such a very important role in the transformational experience at the individual level, but also at the social level too. What kind of spin-offs? And so there is debate right now within the transformational cultural movement about the role of psychedelics, because they know it's there, they participate in it. It forms and informs some of the artwork. It informs and informs some of the experience. And then how now do they deal with the legal side of it? Do you encourage this? Do you try to just keep it kind of under wraps as they have, so to speak? So it's definitely there, and they themselves are wrestling with how to handle it. So there's no real question or real answer to the question, except to say that they themselves know, and they themselves participate, and the police know, and the police are often there, especially at things like Burning Man, where substance abuse and the experience sometimes go hand in hand in really ugly ways.
Right. Well, and what's interesting also is the use of hallucinogenic drugs in brainwashing experiments, and programs, and things like that, and how that could play into it.
Absolutely. There seems to be a real connection with some of the visionary art, the colors, the experience that takes place through the art, and the use of hallucinogenics, the use of different substances, mind-altering substances. Because the mind-altering substances, and Aldous Huxley talked quite a bit about this in some of his books from the 1960s, mind-altering substances open up your consciousness. They open up new ways of looking at the world. They bring out different dynamics, allows you to experience something in a completely different way. And therefore that it starts to inform your worldview. It informs your ideas of spirituality, all the rest. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean that now what you've experienced is real. I mean, after all, what you're doing is taking something to alter reality. Mm-hmm. but it's there nonetheless, and it definitely plays a part in these events.
Right. I mean, I've heard all the arguments from, especially something like DMT, where they say, well, it's a substance that's produced in your own brain. So, what's the big deal if you, get a little extra kick of it? It's like supplementing what you already should have, and it's already, it's in plants and stuff like that. But speaking to Basil's point, there are researchers that are starting to expose, and this has been going on for a while, but how the CIA and the whole movement of counterculturalism stemmed from almost a governmental funded operation,
right?
And so it's interesting how both sides are funded, so to speak. It's
right. It's fascinating, and this is something that's kind of a little off topic in terms of transformational events, but LSD and the whole idea of the psychedelic experience. So many people point to Timothy Leary, and yes, rightfully so. He kind of kickstarted the whole thing,
right?
But there is a real connection between LSD use and mental health.
Right.
In Saskatchewan, there's a little town called Weyburn, Saskatchewan. And Weyburn is like maybe 10,000 people. 2-3 years ago, they imploded, they destroyed the biggest building in Weyburn. And that was a mental health facility that was built, I believe, in the 1930s. A massive, massive hospital. During the time that this hospital was in existence, there was a British physician, a British doctor, who was using and experimenting on patients in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, with LSD and other psychedelic drugs. And the intelligence community would interact with him, would interact with this hospital. And it was then after that it ended up becoming launched through Timothy Leary and through the experience of the 1960s with the hippie culture. But it was interesting how already it was being used in a little out of the way place called Weyburn, Saskatchewan. One of the first places, not necessarily the first, but one of the first places where LSD was being used in a way that was attempting to alter mental illness, alter people's mental state of mind.
Right.
And it was being done through both the medical community and with interest from the intelligence community.
Right. And then, eventually Bluebird and Artichoke, the MK Ultra programs, that experimented the same way, who ultimately found it too unpredictable for their experiments. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, and really not even it doesn't really stop at hallucinogens. Obviously, we've spoken about how the use of drugs is prevalent in these situations, in these transformational events. But I mean, it all goes hand in hand.
It does. And when you take a look at the big picture, it's about trying to experience a new world, trying to experience a new reality.
Right.
And then hopefully building off of that utopian feeling, that utopian experience, and somehow trying to build off of that and create that new reality that you just finished experiencing for yourself.
Right.
It's so interesting. I think in our last episode about zombies, Basil and I talked about, and I don't know how we got on this, but we talked about the assassins and the Hashashin, which are the Islamic group from the 1500s, kind of like equivalent to an Islamic crusade, and how the leader of that group used hashish to basically, give a quote unquote an experience of heaven to his followers to convince them that he was some sort of messianic figure to follow him. It almost seems like this is what's happening at a mass scale with the use of some of these psychedelics as part of the experiential, I guess, evidence or temptation for bringing these people into that whole idea of oneness.
Right, or even the transformative events as a whole, because in that situation you were talking about, Gons, he created an atmosphere. He brought them into a beautiful garden, and there were girls and things like this. It was a whole event that he created to manipulate them.
Right. What's interesting with the New Age movement is, and I remember this in the early 1990s when I began studying the New Age and studying all these different interlocking aspects, was back then, New Age teachers were saying that the New Age movement, the exercise of the New Age, the encounter of the New Age was basically the same thing that was being experienced through psychedelics, but now without the use of the drug. Now just being able to tap into it from a spiritual side and not a psychochemical side.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I've heard that too, where a lot of New Age people do try to move away from actually using the drugs and experience those things, those same things without the drugs. There's a book out that I came across in my younger days. What was it called? It was something to the effect of, how to hallucinate without drugs, how to hallucinate without LSD. And, I never looked into it, but I did think about it because I'm like, I don't need to take drugs. Like that's good. I'm a good Christian boy. I don't need drugs. I can just hallucinate this natural way in this book.
The idea that
sounded awesome.
The idea that it's natural, therefore it has to be good for you.
Right.
Come on, that has its limits. You need water. It's natural. It's good for you, but you have too much. It's called drowning.
Yeah, that's so true. There's something, this is a little bit off topic, but I think it ties in. There's a growing popularity of what's called sensory deprivation tanks. Have you looked at this, Carl, at all?
I've heard of it, but I have not looked into it.
Okay, so basically they're isolation tanks. They were first used by John C. Lilly back in 1954 to test the effects of sensory deprivation. But the people who have really talked about this are really talking it up. And basically what it is it's an isolated tank. Usually there's some salt in the water to allow your body to be buoyant. They put goggles on you so you can, you can't see anything, you can't hear anything, and your body is, in the water. So you, I guess the sensation you receive is that it's the first time your body goes completely relaxed. And you just take, they use language like you take a journey into your mind and stuff like that. And, some people use drugs as sort of an enhancer for this. But, there's testimonies out there with people saying like, I was in there for a couple hours the first time and nothing happened. I was kind of looking around, kind of freaked out, feeling a little claustrophobic. And then at the end, I saw this red beam of light and I saw these entities there and they wanted me to come. And that's when that's when the knock came at the door and I had to go and I had to leave. But I thought, I really wanted to go check out this red line. I have to go there. And then, he goes on to say that, the next time he was in there for 5 hours and it changed his life and all this stuff. So, I guess there is a movement happening in as far as consciousness expansion and technologies that are, emerging. Well, I guess this has been around, but sort of guiding in that process. And I know you've looked at transhumanism. What sorts of devices or plans did they have as far as consciousness alteration, and then as far as like the, tie in with the transformative festivals, do they believe that, because I get the sense that a lot of these events, they're not necessarily for technological, takeover. It seems like they're against transhumanism and things like that as well.
That's interesting because one of the organizers and one of the major advocates of transformational festivals, his name is Jeet K. Long. He's Canadian, like myself. He recognizes that these movements of transformational festivals and transformational culture, he says that it's not about being Luddites. It's not about going back to the land in the sense of a non-technological lifestyle. He says, no. Instead, he says, there is a very focused synthesis that takes place between technology and the experience, and primarily through the area of electronic dance music, the rave, the interactive staging that sometimes takes place, the lighting, and he recognizes that technology here is being used in such a way that it enhances the entire experience. And so it's not that they're against technology. In fact, they're adopters of it. They are, and he even calls themselves early adopters of some of these technological advances, especially in terms of the music industry, the sound industry.
Right. Yeah.
bringing this together in such a way that creates this kaleidoscope of experience through all your various sensory inputs, and drives home this idea of change and transformation alongside the technological element of it. And so it's not that they're opposed to it. I don't necessarily see a lot of correlation between the two. I know it exists, but I believe where it exists in, again, back down to that very basic core worldview. What is it that's trying to be achieved on both sides? On the transformational side, you're trying to achieve the sense of divinity and oneness through the experience of the festival. The festival itself becomes the technique. It becomes the mechanism. It becomes that technology. On the transhumanist side, it's about ascending. It's about going beyond being human. It is about achieving a godlike status through the use of technology, through the use of science and engineering. And I've spent a lot of time interacting with the transhumanist community. I still do. And, it's not like everybody that's in it has nefarious aims and I have got friends who are in it, people who I would consider friends. Our worldview collides completely. But what's important is we recognize each other as, ironically, as being human.
Right.
And therefore we have something that we can begin to talk with each other about. We recognize that, hey, you're living a life, I'm living a life. It's just our view of how salvation comes about is completely different. One is the salvation brought about through the works of my hands, our technology, our engineering, or on the transformational side, through the experience of now a human collective. The other is Jesus Christ saying, no, salvation comes only through the one who can defeat death. And that is the author of life, who is Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. And I've talked about the global brain concept quite a bit in Age of Deceit 2, where it feels like the ideals of a transformative event of oneness and technology collide, where, guys like Dick Pelletier have stated that, we're creating a global brain and we're just active neurons. And,
right.
So, I mean, there is definitely an overlap there. And, I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing booths at these events that have some sort of devices, technological devices that alter your, experience somehow. I'm sure you've run across articles about, you can, we'll be able to, manipulate memory, manipulate certain parts of the brain. I watched a TED Talk the other day with a couple doctors, neuroscientists, or I guess it was a neuroscientist and a neurosurgeon who, their whole perspective on, because the question they posed was, what sorts of ethics do we put in place to move forward with some of these technologies? Because, they do open brain stimulation and, stimulating different parts of people's brains and see their reactions, right there on the spot. And the answer that they gave was, if it reduces suffering. So, I thought, well, I don't know about that. I understand that from a practical sort of ideological point of view, but suffering has its place in our character development. There's a certain aspect of a role that suffering plays. So I guess I'm concerned about if that's their ethics, then, oh gosh, this really is a brave new world, huh?
Right. Well, that's interesting because when you ask the question about technology and transformational festivals, hey, Google goes to Burning Man. Second Life has interacted big time with Burning Man. Facebook goes to Burning Man. San Francisco's tech industry, because San Francisco and Burning Man are one and the same. Burning Man comes out of San Francisco.
Right, yeah.
The Silicon Valley goes to Burning Man, and they have interactive technologies that they work on, develop. It's interesting. I just read an article not that long ago where certain tech companies say, hey, we're already using this as a platform to understand how society and our technologies can kind of mesh and come together, and how we can model and experiment with this in a contained, safe place. And so already it's recognized that technology and the transformative experience go hand in hand. What I do find interesting is how now places like Burning Man, especially Burning Man, how a lot of the longtime burners are looking at these developments and going, well, Burning Man is losing what it originally was, which was, and now it's being accepted by the CEOs and by corporate America and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And so it demonstrates the fact that, that the two do come together.
Are there effects or situations in everyday life, the normal world, that you can see changes stemming from these transformative events? You mentioned how the whole idea is to, go to the events and then go home and then sort of, influence the world around you in that way. Has there been any societal changes or anything that you can account for specifically? I mean, if we have Google and Facebook going, these are the people who more or less shape our experiences.
I'm going to flip that over on you. I'm going to flip it in a different way.
Do it.
Yes. And that comes back around to the fact that these events already mirror society. So here's an example. In my province of Manitoba, our grade 12 education curriculum, our social studies curriculum, is so centered on global citizenship and oneness that UNESCO uses my province's grade 12 curriculum as a model curriculum and says to the world, this is what you need to follow. Years and years ago, back in 1997, one of the first internationalist events I went to was the Global Citizenship 2000 Youth Congress, which brought together Robert Mueller's World Core curriculum from the United Nations. It brought together people who came and spoke on oneness, and we lived it out for 3 days in this conference built around the idea that we need to integrate oneness into our Canadian education system and put in a curriculum, a philosophy of curriculum that spoke to mankind as divine and experiencing our divinity. Okay? Now, this is infused everywhere in the educational side and has been for well over a decade, probably closer to 2 or 3 decades already. In fact, you can go quite a bit further back than that and see how this worldview has been ingrained in our colleges, our universities, our high schools, and all the way down into the elementary level of our school experience. All of that said, the question then becomes, what consequences of that worldview being completely embedded in our society, in our culture? When I went to school, when you went to school, when people are going to school right now, what are the consequences of that? Transformational festivals are the consequences of the worldview already being accepted, swallowed, and held onto. So the question should be flipped. What perpetrated transformational events, transformational festivals? What caused them? And the cause is not the event itself. It's the fact that society has already accepted it and has been ingrained in this ideology for a long, long time.
So you see it more as a concentration of what's already meandering about in society.
Right. It's a consequence, not a cause.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What do you see as part of the, there's so much going on in the world, with obviously, I mean, this is kind of left field, but I feel like there's a tie-in that maybe you can bridge here because, obviously the news talks about Ebola and the Middle East, and there's all kinds of stuff going on with like terrorism and all this stuff. Do you think that's just part of the counter movement to, as a seed to create these, transformative sort of ideologies to kind of, like this is what we're against, so they have a target that they're trying to move off the, the global stage, so to speak.
It's interesting because this last couple of weeks I've been reading through a lot of speeches, some of the collective speeches, pamphlets, and articles of Lenin and Stalin, built around the Russian Revolution, that time period of the Russian Revolution, the summer of 1917. And both of them, in their speeches and in their pamphlets and articles, state over and over again that a revolution, in order for it to be a true revolution, one that really changes society, one that changes civilization, changes the way we view reality, it requires the intentional use and the intentional, you could say, the leveraging of crisis. When society feels that the crisis is deep enough and has penetrated far enough into its culture, into its psyche, then revolution is possible. You need to have some way of mobilizing the masses, mobilizing people towards an end goal. And they're saying that is the art of all revolution. And what's fascinating is a couple of months ago, I was reading through Jacques Ellul's book, The New Demons. Jacques Ellul was a Christian theologian who had some different ideas, but a French theologian. And in his book, The New Demons, he talks in 1975 about how festivals are really containers for revolution, containers in such a way that you see a crisis in humanity. And that crisis then drives you towards trying to find a model or an experimental way out of that existence, out of that crisis mode. And so anytime you do see a crisis that takes place, especially something that is of such significance that it rocks civilization to its knees, expect some type of transformational aspect to come along, either intentionally, either by design, or just simply, this is something we can now anchor ourselves to because it's expedient. It's here.
Right.
I experienced this back in 2012 when myself, along with my intern, we embedded ourselves in the International Congress of the World Federalist Movement. Now, the World Federalist Movement, for most people, it's a name that doesn't mean anything. The World Federalist Movement is the largest pro-world government lobby group and educational group on the planet. They've been around since the 1940s. In the 1940s, they helped to push through the United Nations. They had far more robust ideas for the UN than what it did become. But ever since then, the World Federalist community has stood for world government, one world, coming together politically. And back in 2012, I was able to attend their International Congress. And over again, we heard the importance of crisis, that what we need is the next world crisis. We don't want the crisis to come, but when it comes, we need to be able to leverage it, to use it as an opportunity to bring about political transformation, social transformation, cultural, economic transformation, everything and anything that will move us to the idea of one world and the absolute necessity of one world government. And it was brought up this way. World War I gave us the League of Nations. It was crisis, opportunity, boom, that's what was birthed, League of Nations. World War II gave us the United Nations. Our next global crisis, be it economic, political, conflict-oriented, whatever it may be, our next true global crisis, one that rocks the world to its knees, will bring about the next evolution of global governance, the next evolution of one world. And so this idea of crisis is certainly a part of that, if not necessarily the design, it's part of that psyche, it's part of that structure of our thinking, that when crisis comes, the world screams for solutions. And so I look at the transformational events, and what has the crisis been that we have had pumped into our heads since we were little kids? Well, the world is in conflict. Man is separated one from another. We have ecological disasters, the problems of the world, poverty, on and on it goes, And so you end up seeing that there are certain groups that are demonized, certain groups that are marginalized. You're the troublemakers. Right. If you take a look at things like the ecological crisis from its very beginning, Christianity was the one that was singled out as the troublemaker, as the problem. Back in 1970, the very first Earth Day, their little Bible that came out, the Environmental Handbook, said it on numerous occasions, in fact, explicitly, that unless we reject the Christian axiom, we will have nothing more than a continuation of the ecological problem.
Wow.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, it was wild. It was so radically anti-Christian. And then, this is a little off topic, but I guess it's not. It kind of fits together. And then at the end of the environmental handbook, I believe on page 332, I don't have it in front of me, is a list of about 15 different worldviews that should replace Christianity as ecologically sensitive worldviews, like shamanism, like Teilhard de Chardin Catholicism, like Buddhism. The list goes on. Alchemism. It was just wild. Taoism. And then it even suggested that what we need to see is mankind coming together in short-term, model, transformative cities, little cultural zones that we come together, we celebrate our oneness, we celebrate our connection with nature, and then we leave and infuse that back within our broader society. But the idea there was that Christianity was the core problem that has caused our ecological problems. And so whenever you see crisis being pushed out, you also need to watch as there is a way of leveraging that to achieve a transformational goal.
That's interesting. It sounds like a lot of what Alice Bailey wrote with
No surprise.
I was thinking about that. Do you see these transformative events as an enemy or a malicious force in the universe?
I don't necessarily see it as an enemy. I see it just simply as a continuation of where mankind has always been. I just see this as a continuation of Genesis chapter 3, as are all other attempts at saving ourselves, all other attempts at being, you could call it the designers of our own destiny. So in that sense, I don't necessarily see it as a malevolent force. It's just the reality of our human condition as we continually live out this existence of Genesis chapter 3. And I'll be honest, if it wasn't for Jesus Christ, Carl Teichrib would be there too. Seriously.
Yeah.
We all would be.
Yeah.
So I can't point my fingers and say, oh, you bad person because you go to these events or, that kind of thing. No, not at all. It's interesting. How are we now supposed to react to these kind of events, these kind of things that are taking place? I used Paul as an example earlier. I think also Jesus with the woman at the well is a really good one, because Jesus with the woman at the well, he interacts with somebody outside of his culture, somebody who would be taboo within the culture that he was a part of. And he doesn't condemn her. Her sins condemn her already. And he's provocative about who he is, but he uses the well, the water and the well situation as that common ground. We need to ask, what are the common grounds? And you asked that question earlier. Well, he used that as the common ground, and then he used that as a way of bringing about a conversation that pointed to who he was. And the fact that the Messiah now was standing right there in front of her.
Yeah. Now, lastly, I think as we start to wrap up, I think it needs to be asked, and I think you might have answered it, which is, even if for the purposes of research, would you, have you, or will you be attending one of these transformative events?
I've been wanting to for a long time. And I would like to, if the resources came along, absolutely. I've got some inroads into a couple of them, Burning Man definitely being one. I've been wanting to go for a long time with a social survey. I'm very curious to know, and I think I have a good idea of how many people go who already have some type of a church background, or who are youth leaders or former youth leaders, former youth kids from churches. I think we would be surprised, and I think the church needs to realize that that's where their young people either are going now or are about to go to these types of transformational events. I think it'd be a good place to go to do some very intense and important social, spiritual surveys and to do that research. I've done some of that online in Second Life, but it's something else when you go there and you're able to interact with these people on a one-on-one basis. I mean, listen, guys, this is why I've gone to World Federalist events. This is why I've gone to Global Interfaith events, why I've gone to some very significant transformational events in terms of transhumanism. But I need to be able to go to at least a handful of these transformational festivals and interact on a very intimate way. That way, talk to people face to face and try to get a handle on it from that perspective. I wouldn't suggest that for everybody, just like I don't suggest that every Christian run off to the nearest New Age conference or the nearest World Government event or the nearest United Nations event. I mean, I've been there. I've been to 30 or 35 events like that already since I guess 96, 97. But it's not exactly the best place to take you and your kids for a Christian outing. It just doesn't work. But it's important that somebody goes and somebody takes the time to really dig through the layers in a very personal way.
Yeah, and I actually, I think your conversation with Derek, and of course this conversation is doing the same thing for me again, is really. I've made Age of Deceit 1. I've made Age of Deceit 2. I feel that this topic is something that I need to tackle for Age of Deceit 3, and it's a long-term sort of project in that way. But maybe we'll chat offline or something to start looking at some possibilities, because I really think that this is an aspect that a lot of folks don't even realize is happening, to them and to their kids and stuff. So it needs to be to the forefront a little bit more.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. And definitely, we appreciate all the research you've done, and, oh gosh, I'm sorry. Basil is messaging me, asking me how to pronounce your last name.
I'm trying to get a rap together here. Beautiful. And I'm like, how do I say that?
Well, if you would have messed it up, that's totally fine with me, because I've heard it pronounced every way imaginable.
Is it Teichrib?
Teichrib, like a tie and a crib.
Okay,
put
that's
tie
good,
and crib together.
I was going to say Teichrib for some reason. Okay. Carl, why don't you tell us how to find more of your research, more of your literature, things like that? How can we learn more about what you're doing?
Well, you can go to forcingchange.org. That's our webpage. Where things happen at Forcing Change is on the backside, the membership side, because we have a monthly magazine that we put out on all kinds of topics that we've been discussing today on your program, including transformational festivals. I would certainly suggest people sign in, even for just a handful of months, and at the very least, grab the August 2013 edition entitled Celebrations for Transformation, from Burning Man to Tomorrowland and beyond, because there's information in there that'll help pull all of this together, and it's a very important topic that we need to have a little bit better grasp of.
There we go. All right, everybody, make sure to do that. And again, Carl Teichrib, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show, buddy.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
So there you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Canary Cry Radio. Now, for those of you who are super hip and cool and have the Facebooks and the Twitters and things like that, make sure to check us out. You can find us just by searching for Canary Cry Radio. Also, for you super, super cool cats, Canary Cry Radio is moving into the realm of Instagram.
Sweet.
Yeah, and Instagram is awesome, and most of you know that. Some of you might not know what Instagram is.
Yeah, what is it?
Instagram is like Twitter, only it's all pictures, awesome pictures. And so we're going to be posting pictures of our trip to the conference, our travels gons, also some, things that we find. I've been finding gons, as you know. I always send you little pictures of secret Illuminati emblems and Masonic craziness that I find all around the alleyways of this great country of ours.
Yeah, it's always kind of weird.
Yeah, it's all some weird stuff I'll be posting there. And so, yeah, it'll be super cool. My father seems to think that Instagram is where all the kids go to get away from Facebook nowadays. So if you're into that, you can go ahead and do that. What else we got? Oh, those of you, and now we do this because we haven't done this in a while, but you should go to iTunes, the iTunes store, and make sure to leave us a review or a rating or both. That would be great, because that really helps us out, helps get the word out, and helps others know what to expect from listening to the podcast.
By the way, have you updated your iTunes?
Not yet. No, I try not to sign away my soul by not reading the fine print.
Right. Okay. Well, anyone who did,
I'm still running on a 1997 version of iTunes.
Well, anyone who did update iTunes, the new way to get to all the stuff, there's just a radio button. So just hit radio, and then you can search for Canary Cry Radio.
There you go. Make sure to do that. What else do we have here? Instagram. Oh, email. Sign up for our email list. We've got about 400 of you now signed up, receiving our once in a while emails where we give you very personalized audio messages with updates on the show and other cool things and music jams and things like that. So that's cool.
The little music grams.
Yeah, music grams. we get very little unsubscribes, so that's going well. So make sure to do that. You can do that by going to canarycryradio.com and signing up for our email list on the bottom, I think, of every page.
Yep. Or if you're on there for a while, it might pop up and
there you go.
Bug you about it.
Yeah. Also, while you're on canarycryradio.com, if you feel that Canary Cry Radio has affected your life or edified you or taught you things that you've never known, or, you just like the sound of my sweet voice in your ear, please consider supporting Canary Cry Radio financially. Pray about it. See what the Lord puts on your heart. It really helps us, keeps us on the air, keeps the ball rolling, and also helps develop some new things we have going on.
Ooh, new things. What new things?
Oh, I can't tell you that yet.
Okay. But there we do have new things.
Very cool, big new things coming. So if you would like to be a part of that, please consider supporting us. We love you so much. Even if you don't, help us out. You're all still nice people. What else? We got something else? Anything else cool?
Other than the conference coming up? No. That's consumed my life.
Yeah.
Do you know how many times I've said conference? I dream about it now.
Too many. Yeah. Stop it. Well, maybe do it one more time. What's this conference about? Gonzo?
I don't want to say the whole thing.
Well, it's there.
Just go to theprophecyforum.com and
theprophecyforum.com.
Yeah, there you go.
Check it out. It's going to be cool.
It's actually almost sold out, so go to the live stream.
Whoa. We'll do all of it.
Well, I think the live stream, you'll be able to see us, you and I, do a little musical ditty.
Oh yeah, we're going to be doing some worship there. So if you guys like worshiping the Lord, make sure to check in, and we'll be doing that on the live stream. Okay. All right, everybody, there you go. Thanks for tuning in for this episode of Canary Cry Radio. Make sure to tune in next time. But until then, think outside the cage.